Let me welcome my studio guest this hour. Dan Perry is an international affairs analyst and the former Europe and Middle East editor at the Associated Press. Welcome, Dan. I'm also joined by Lital Shochat-Chertau. She's a member of Forum Dvora, Women in Foreign Policy. Welcome. And our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran, is here with us as well. So, Dan, I'll start with you because today is a happy occasion, of course. It's good to see those men back with their families and smiling. It is also tinged with incredible sadness because Yarden comes out not knowing what has happened to his wife and children.
Yes, it's obviously both those things, and it's amazing the power of video. One of the first videos that came out on October 7th or shortly thereafter was of Shili Bibas and her two little boys, almost scripted in the way that she was obviously so terrified, and the boys are so cute, and it became this international iconic image. And there's something about, I mean, millions of people around the world suffer, but when this kind of context is created, they become sort of celebrity victims, and everyone wants to know what happened to the mother and her two boys. And of course, the signs are not good. I don't think we know for sure, but I just don't know. But it is clearly cause for pessimism that their names appear in the hostages to be released in the first round, dead or alive, yet they haven't been released with the first ones to be released, which you'd think if they were alive would have been the case. So, yeah, very much tinged with sadness, obviously great joy at every person who is released, and every one of them is their own story that could support a novel or a movie, and words fail us, really. The pictures tell a story, but on the other hand, there is all this regret at the path not taken, and there will be a lot of recriminations over the entire war strategy, I fear.
People in the outside world watching may not be able to feel it as strongly as we do here, but it is just a deep, deep, deep psychological wound that is still continuing in spite of this joyous news.
Emily, thank you. Emily Francis there down at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv as Keith Siegel flown overhead in a helicopter on his way to Ichilov Hospital for much needed treatment. Dan Perry, we've still got 20 hostages to be released in this part of the deal. The IDF says that 8 of those hostages are no longer alive. So we are going to see more of these handover ceremonies that Hamas is kind of finessing, aren't they? They're really using this as an opportunity to get their message across. Compared with what we saw on Thursday, that very chaotic, very distressing scenes of Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses having to wade through a baying mob, this was a bit different, but there was still a lot of messaging, wasn't there?
Hamas's messaging is that they won the war because the war will end and they remain standing, essentially, no matter the cost to their people, no matter the consequences to the organization itself. That's going to be their narrative, and that's the messaging, which is why it was perplexing to see them allow the disgraceful fiasco that happened on Thursday. And I've heard explanations for it, including perhaps that was because the mob scene in Khan Yunis was orchestrated by Islamic Jihad and not Hamas. And when Hamas is in charge, they're large and in charge, and it's proper ceremonies and ridiculous release documents and, you know, all choreographed.
Goodie bags.
Yeah, and goodie bags, whereas when jihad is allowed to have its moment in the sun, the result is this dangerous debacle with the hostages being jostled by the crowd.
But those were civilians trying to get at the hostages. I mean, they weren't wearing uniforms.
Oh, look, I mean, it's all very dangerous because the narrative from the close-up video of that event, you could get the impression that there's 100,000 people there waiting to rip apart the hostages, whereas if you zoom out a little, you see it was a couple thousand people. Many of them were camera people, and it was just, it seemed staged, and it seemed stupidly staged, because what on earth can be the benefit that attaches even to Islamic Jihad? But you know what, far be it for me to explain what maniacal jihadis want to do. The bigger picture is that they're going to claim victory, no matter what. And
amongst the rubble, however many dead,
it looks like, you know, it was hit by a nuclear bomb, and yet they're going to say we won because Israel failed to impose its will, which was for Hamas to be removed from power. And I hope we have time to discuss this, because this is one of the most foolish things I've seen in recent geopolitics, the fact that Israel refused to contemplate an alternative, almost guaranteeing that this will be the result.
you're talking an alternative in terms of working more closely with the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, a governance alternative to Hamas in Gaza. I mean, look, from the beginning, Hamas more or less said, give us enough prisoners, and the deal is you get back the hostages in exchange for an end to the war and a total pullout. Now, the current three-stage deal gives them that. So what did Israel gain for the additional 14, 15 months of war during which its economy suffered? Almost 1,000 soldiers died. Its good name has been rubbished, troubles at the ICC and the ICJ. What on earth did Israel gain?
Well, I guess the other side is Sinwar was still alive, Haniyeh was still alive.
Do you think they care?
Nasrallah was still alive.
Do you think they care? Sure. What Israel can say is we got rid of a bunch of terrorist chieftains. The only real gain that I see, genuine gain, is the reshuffling of the deck in Lebanon. Lebanon is the big
Hezbollah's out of the picture,
yeah.
right?
No, that's great.
And Iran is
Syria
as well.
Syria, which sure. So Assad's gone.
So I mean, and also, of course, we can't leave out President Trump, a much more sympathetic president in the White House.
That was a war outcome.
No, but I'm saying that is generally perceived as having moved the needle on the deal.
I would be much more happy with the war outcome if Hamas were gone. And the reason Hamas isn't gone, partly, is because of Israel's own non-strategy strategy.
All right, so you place all the blame on the Israeli government, just to be clear, for the failure.
That Hamas isn't gone?
Of the failure of the deal to happen sooner.
I mean, all I can say is Hamas has been messaging since last December.
Okay.
In exchange for a pullout and an end to the war, we'll give you back the hostages. That's a fact. None of this will work unless Israel gets out of the way and stops preventing discussion of a version of the PA replacing Hamas in Gaza. Now, the good thing is the Trump administration does appear to be prepared to leverage the strength of the U.S. And Hamas will need to be convinced because they're right now looking at victory from their perspective, and that has to be taken away.
But Dan, when you look at the situation in Jenin and other areas where the PA is in control,
it's a less bad option. The only way for this to happen is for the U.S. to compel Qatar to send Hamas not another shekel, for the U.S. to compel the European banks to crack down on payments to Hamas shell companies, not another shekel, to tell Egypt you will not receive any more military aid unless you make sure there is no more smuggling.
So are you happy with the noises you're hearing coming from the Trump administration on this?
I'm sorry?
Are you happy with the noises that you're hearing coming from the Trump administration?
I tell you, generally speaking, in the world, I don't much like the Trump administration's belief in blunt and brainless force. But in the Middle East, that's an exception. I think it has to happen this way. The Biden administration proved sadly weak on almost every front, and Trump appears both engaged and willing to apply pressure. But much of the pressure will have to be to come down on Israel.
Pressure and benefits, we must say.
Absolutely. The Palestinians need to. The messaging needs to be: Gaza requires tens of billions in reconstruction. It will come if Hamas is gone. Now, I know that there's a notion that Palestinian public opinion is irrational, and there's a strong element of insanity there. Let's test it. If they face a choice of telling every pollster from Khalil Shkaki to anyone else, we want Hamas gone, and 90% say that, that will look differently. They have to understand what the opportunity cost of continuing to support Hamas, to say they support Hamas, to tolerate Hamas is. They're basically, this is very cruel what I'm saying, and I'm aware of it. I basically am saying the ending of the suffering of the Palestinian population in Gaza has to a degree, be conditioned upon Hamas leaving. Now, that sounds unhumanitarian, but I fear there's no way around it. It has to be conditioned, and that attaches to yet another thing. Probably we have to organize a situation where people who want to leave the Gaza Strip while all this is working itself out are able to. And if you enter that paradigm, you will be accused of ethnic cleansing, and you'll start dealing with the Palestinian.
We tend to be going in a circle because
on not leaving their land.
No other force will be able to move into Gaza until Hamas is gone, and the only force,
they have to agree.
The only force that can defeat Hamas is the IDF. So we kind of
have you seen that happening?
We're talking about a military, maybe on a military aspect. You're probably right, but I think that I do agree with Dan that it's an issue of choices. We have to put some choices on the table. Yep. And I think that talking about giving the people of Gaza an option to leave I don't know to say if that's a realistic option, but we have seen, interestingly enough, after Trump's comments about having Egypt and Jordan take Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, we've seen demonstration on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing against letting Palestinians from Gaza
Right, but
enter
there is a
Egypt.
suggestion that they were not necessarily grassroots protests. They were not spontaneous. They were kind of orchestrated.
Look,
a little bit by
I
the
think that we
leadership.
always have to question spontaneously
Yeah,
when we're
but
talking about sites in the
Can I
Arab
just
world.
say, this is a no-win situation, because if you say, look, we're going to put the squeeze on the Gaza population to basically expel Hamas one way or another.
Well, they can't.
Hold on. If you say that, then you're basically prolonging their suffering. It seems like the right thing to do to let those who want to leave, if that is going to be your strategy.
Of course.
On the other hand, the minute you enter that discussion, it sounds like you have cleverly engineered an ethnic cleansing. It really is a no-win situation, but that is the corral into which we've all been led
Unless
by the
it's
strategy
done by
of the
Arab
government in the
countries.
past 15 months.
You're clearly a very close family, clearly a lot of love in your family. Is Gadi someone who was important to you when you were growing up? Were you close?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, he was. I mean, we are very, very close. And, I'm the second eldest cousin in the family. So I had him for very many years before the others came. And I adore him since childhood, really. Always wanted to jump into his suitcase and travel with him around the world.
All this is something that we have to carry with us and remind ourselves that this, unfortunately, these aren't just clean, happy moments. They're tainted with a lot of pain and a lot of suffering.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ariel. Dan?
Yeah, it's obviously moments of great emotion here, and we're seeing the creation of individual stories of courage and resilience and decency. And of course, the kibbutzniks are a very special brand of person. But there's also universal lessons here. I think a lot of us in our lives tend to take each other for granted, our families and our friendships. And somehow this story, this Israeli story, this Middle Eastern story, this human story, as you see these hostages who went through this absolute nightmare, the survivors, being reunited with their families, the joy is so genuine and deep. And I think it offers a moment to reflect for each of us upon our own lives how we should cherish every moment.
We've got a statement from the Arab League, who've been meeting in Cairo. The foreign ministers from Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the PA, they say that they reject outright any transfer of Palestinians from their lands, citing under any circumstances or justifications. This, of course, is a response to President Trump's call for Egypt and Jordan to take in some civilians from Gaza. As he put it, they deserve to live without violence for a bit. And he has, this wasn't just Trump throwing something out there. He's gone back to this three times now.
Look, I just for the record, I oppose any notion of removing populations, but I also don't think that people should be jailed in their hometown. I have the right to get up and fly to Paris. And I think, a person in Gaza should have the same right. If, and maybe since their economy has been devastated, assisting them to seek comfort and care elsewhere.
Especially where they're surrounded by countries who champion
might not be a crime
cause.
against humanity. I mean, so I would ask our good friends in the Arab League, do they want to be jailed in their home countries? Because that is more or less what they are suggesting for the Palestinians. Now, that's not a solution. Depopulating Gaza or any part of Palestine is not a solution. But it does need to be said that Hamas must be removed. And it now falls to the Arab world to engineer that and to stop playing games. These games that they have been playing have blown up in everyone's faces. It's time for them to be adults.
Right.
And they're creating false hope for the Palestinians. Yes. They're not giving them actual solutions. The solutions must be there. If they want to be any true prosperity and true future for Gaza, they have to bring them different options.
Consider the Palestinians in Lebanon. 4 generations into their lives in Lebanon don't have full rights as Lebanese citizens. This is madness. And the world has tolerated crazy things from the countries in this region. I hate to say it, but it is the soft bigotry of low expectations, to quote George W. Bush. And I think the Trump administration may finally put an end to it by rewiring of them in exchange for everything they get from the West and from the outside world.
The status quo is certainly being turned on its head, isn't it?
Palestinians in camps are in Lebanon are put in camps, closed off camps, that there is no law and order. The Lebanese army does not enter those camps in Lebanon. In Jordan, in Amman, there's an UNRWA office. I'm not sure why there's even an UNRWA office in Jordan, but this treatment of the Palestinians perpetuates their condition. It works against their own benefit.
Why are they the only people in the world to be to have their own UN refugee agency?
They have been sold a narrative that you can have perpetual refugee status, and we are used to hearing about 7-8 million Palestinian refugees. This is ridiculous. If we applied the same standard to South Asia, you'd currently have 80 million Pakistani refugees.
And that is why what President Trump is doing now, he's placing this false narrative in the face of the world, mainly the Arab world. And now they're going to be forced to make a decision. Okay, you feel that the Palestinian issue is the most important issue. What are you going to do about it? What is the Arab League going to do about it? What is Egypt? What is Jordan planning to do about it when they say, no, we're not going to take any of them to our borders, but this problem needs to be solved?
The foreign policy we have seen over the past 2 decades, when it has been no Palestinian state first, everything else will fit in around it.
And like the Abraham Accord, it's being flipped on its head. With the Abraham Accord, it was successful and brought somewhat prosperity. It broke it, and I think this is the next chain or next link in the chain that needs to be broken to build this new chain of a new perspective and a new future in the Middle East, one that Israel is incorporated into it rather than singled out as the only problem.
For this to work, Israel has to be part of that chain. Israel has to be a key link in that chain, and the entire what I call non-strategy strategy of the right religious coalition has to be put in a dustbin of history. Israel has to also become mature, not just the Arabs.
Maybe the Abraham Accords could be, a beam of light or an example, set example for other countries. Look, if you want to have a future, not only look for a future, but if you want to have a future, you have to step up your game. You have to enter this new phase of history.
Well, I think the proof in the pudding will be if, as part of this rejiggering of the region and Israel's own letting go of its reveries about resettling Gaza with Jews, et cetera, and understanding the Holy Land needs a partition and externalizing that understanding, in the short term, Israel gets peace or at least normalization with Saudi Arabia. That is apparently, seemingly, the achievable next step on the route to this better Middle East. All
right, Dan Perry, Lital Shachat Chertau, Ariel Osran, thank you all very much indeed.